Ladies and gentlemen, here is the 45th President of the United States, Rachel Maddow. Good evening, Madam President.
I prefer to think of myself as the first fake president of the United States.
No, that was the last one. You forgot already?
Fair enough. Thank you, Keith. And thanks to you at home for staying with us for the next hour. The president hosted BP executives at the White House today. BP then let their Swedish is his first language chairman express to the press his concern for the little people. That didn't go over very well. Turns out all the big oil companies' disaster plans are essentially exactly the same. That's strange. We'll figure out why that is in just a moment with Congressman Ed Markey. And Dick Armey is trying to get on TV again by talking lots of smack about MSNBC. Mr. Armey, wish granted. That's all coming up this hour. But we begin tonight with the sad, uncomfortable walk of shame that BP executives were forced to make today after being called to the White House to meet personally with President Obama. That little perp walk out of the West Wing was the visual accompaniment to a tremendously consequential set of headlines today for anyone who is an executive at BP or anyone who has a lot of money invested in that company. BP announcing today that it'll set aside $20 billion, billion with a B, $20 billion, in a fund to compensate victims of their still ongoing oil disaster in the Gulf. BP also notified its stockholders today to stop expecting billions of dollars in dividend payouts. Those payouts will not be forthcoming, not for last quarter, not for this quarter, not for next quarter. Even as the president said today that it's in all of our interest that BP stays financially able to continue to bear the costs of the disaster, the future of the company at this point looks about as bright as the future of a delicate offshore barrier island. The reeds that hold its soil together, suffocating and dying now under a thick layer of hot, toxic crude. Despite a lack of specificity in President Obama's big speech last night about what he wants to happen politically now on oil and energy issues, Mr. Obama did make one new commitment that could potentially be a very, very big deal for the country and for the Gulf. A commitment that is rather welcome, in my estimation, a long overdue announcement from the United States government about part of the United States that has been long neglected.
The oil spill represents just the latest blow to a place that's already suffered multiple economic disasters and decades of environmental degradation that has led to disappearing wetlands and habitats. And the region still hasn't recovered from Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. That's why we must make a commitment to the Gulf Coast that goes beyond responding to the crisis of the moment. I make that commitment tonight. Earlier, I asked Ray Mabus, the Secretary of the Navy, who's also a former governor of Mississippi and a son of the Gulf Coast, to develop a long-term Gulf Coast restoration plan as soon as possible.
A long-term Gulf restoration plan. Rebuild the Gulf Coast, finally. Because of oil and gas production and shipping and diverting the Mississippi River and dredging and canals and really bad development decisions, Louisiana, which has 40% of the wetlands in the continental U.S., Louisiana loses a football field-sized area of wetlands every 38 minutes. If we want Louisiana to continue to exist, if we want New Orleans to continue to exist as a city, that is a really big problem. In the last 7 years, between 2003, when southeastern Louisiana came up with its oil spill disaster response plan, between 2003 and now, the giant oil spill, experts say that 500 square miles of Louisiana wetlands disappeared. They just turned into open water. And that's before all these wetlands and barrier islands started getting slimed with oil, which will kill them and speed up their disappearance dramatically. As I have said before, and will probably say again, if we were losing this much American territory to a foreign country, we would be at war with that foreign country. But President Obama has now announced a long-term Gulf Coast restoration plan, a concentrated effort to protect and rebuild the critical shoreline of the Gulf Coast and the wetlands. Very welcome, very good news that was slightly undercut by the one concrete thing that the president said the government is now doing off the Louisiana coast.
We've approved the construction of new barrier islands in Louisiana to try to stop the oil before it reaches the shore.
New barrier islands. The barrier islands have been this political football that's been kicked around in Louisiana, not just since the BP oil disaster started, but for a long time, even before that. But if you're going to take seriously the need to repair and protect coastal Louisiana, if you want to take seriously the need to protect what's there and bring back what's been lost, if you want to take care of the Gulf, you should probably not be taking seriously dumb ideas like building these barrier islands out of sand off the coast. And I don't just say that as a jerk on TV. I say that because there isn't a single prominent coastal scientist who has endorsed this idea. And the list of prominent coastal scientists who have said this idea is dumb, that it's maybe worse than doing nothing, is a list that is growing by the day, and they have not been quiet about it. The idea here is to build 6-foot-high sand barriers, sand berms, that would supposedly stop oil somehow from getting to shore. It's a multi-million-dollar project that involves dredging sand from nearby waters to build about maybe 40 miles, maybe more of these sand berms. It's something that some local politicians have been demanding throughout this disaster.
Once dredging begins, we would literally begin to see land or sand booms in about 10 days. This is an extremely important component of our own plan to protect our coast from this oil. And by the way, this plan will also help to protect Louisiana from future hurricane surge as well.
If only that were true. If only that were supported by the available scientific informed opinion and evidence. Gulf Coast scientists and geologists who've been watching the sand berm idea gaining traction have been furiously waving all sorts of red flags trying to stop this thing. Red flags about new trenches in the water that they would cause that could forever change wave patterns in the area and prevent the all-important life-sustaining sediment that the coast needs from ever reaching the coast. Red flags about the sand berms eroding almost immediately after they're built. These 6-foot-high berms are about to come face-to-face with hurricane season. You could spend months building them only to have them disappear in a large tropical storm. Red flags about oil that gets into coastal areas, potentially getting trapped in there behind these new berms. Red flags about the sand barriers potentially channeling incoming oil-soaked water to go faster and therefore further into shore. Not to mention the fact that this project will take months and months and months to complete. And yet, after sustained political pressure from folks like Louisiana's governor, the Obama administration has given into the sand berm idea, despite the fact that even their own scientific experts, their own environmental experts, say it's dumb as well. As the Wall Street Journal put it, quote, EPA says the sand piles probably won't protect coast, but Louisiana leaders want them, and government signed off. It would be one thing if this was just some local proposal, something that one community was trying. Maybe it was a good idea or not, but they were trying something. But when it's being touted by the President of the United States in an Oval Office address as the thing that we're doing as a nation, the fact that it's a bad idea, that no one who understands the science of this idea supports this idea, that seems important. We supposedly have an administration now that values science, right? We're all bragging about the fact that our Nobel Prize-winning energy secretary has a Nobel Prize. Did we mention he won a Nobel Prize? He's Nobel Prize-winning. We're all bragging about the fact that he and his Nobel Prize are personally involved in calculating the flow rate at the oil pipe right now. But if we supposedly have all of these super smart, science-driven folks in high levels of government, and we're privileging science over political expediency, finally, why are we okaying this dumb idea? Even if you don't care about the stupidity of this idea itself, it does raise concerns about the process. There should be a point at which somebody says, hey, that's stupid. Look at the science here. And then the idea should get stopped. Who's supposed to be doing that? And who isn't doing that? Joining us now via Skype is Robert Young, professor of coastal geology and director of the Program for the Study of Developed Shorelines at Western Carolina University. Professor Young, thanks very much for your time today.
Happy to be here, Rach.
What is your assessment of these berms? Do you think that it's likely that they would work?
No, I think you summed it up pretty good. I think that there are a number of problems with the efficacy of the project and the design, what little design we've seen. It's going to take too long to build them. They're going to begin to erode as soon as they've been constructed. And there are just a lot of missing details to help us understand how effective they would be at trapping the oil. Are they going to be cleaning these things immediately upon completion, or are they going to let them sit there and gather oil and risk being redistributed by a storm? So, there are some real questions about the efficacy of the project, and there are so many questions remaining in how they complete the design and what they're planning to do, that it's almost impossible to evaluate how well this is going to work.
When I look at all of the bad technology that we've got for containing spilled oil, for isolating it, for cleaning it up, for keeping it offshore, it's just comparing different degrees of bad to a certain extent. I mean, booming when done well can work, but it's hard to do it right. We don't seem to be able to do it right, at least right now in the Gulf Coast. Is this just another idea that's not ideal, or are you worried that this will actually cause more oil-related trouble than it is likely to solve?
Well, I think there are a couple problems.